just prior to the subsolar point on the south side and the floor of it, nearly evening, except there is one dark hole. Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, is that crazy? That's a beautiful shot.
So I hope that you guys liked that. One of the things that we know is that there will be glitches, and one of the first glitches that we have is our live stream is not working. So hang tight just 1 second, and then Tamara, I will switch to you. Okay. I'm gonna try. Okay, I think it's just not streaming in the place that we expect it to be streaming. So Dan, maybe you can redirect the Sketch site to link to wherever it's going. But we'll work on this for tomorrow. It'll be better. So with that, I would like to hand the floor over to Tamara Ledley, who is ESIP's president, to kick us off with a welcome. And Tamara, I'm gonna share the slides and should be good to go in just 1 second.
Wow, that video was pretty impressive, quite a history. Together, the ESIP community makes data matter. Watching that video reminds me how far we have come from the first Earth Day 50 years ago in the collection, stewardship, and use of data for our planet. Welcome to the 2020 Earth Science Information Partners ESIP's summer meeting and our first virtual meeting. I am Tamara Ledley, president of ESIP. ESIP is a virtual organization, but since its inception in 1998, ESIP has had 44 in-person meetings twice annually in the summer and winter. These meetings and the work in between have developed a thriving community of collaborators and friends. The global COVID-19 pandemic has provided an opportunity for us to refactor these gatherings as we move to the virtual world for our 45th meeting. This is a giant experiment. Things will go wrong, as we've already seen. To provide some certainty for the ESIP community, the ESIP board made the bold move to announce that both this meeting and the January 2021 meeting will be virtual. So we are learning from this meeting to inform the planning for the virtual winter meeting in January 2021. You are our sensors. Please provide your input when evaluation opportunities are offered, and feel free to let me or the ESIP staff know directly as well. As we start the next 2 weeks together, I want to remind you of ESIP's vision, which is being realized through this meeting with over 500 leaders from around the world promoting the collection, stewardship, and the use and reuse of earth science data and information to be responsive to societal needs. My experience with ESIP has revolved around the educational uses of data. I resonate most with the responsive to societal needs part of ESIP's vision, and I see that enabling students to access and understand earth science data and integrate it into their decisions as a way of preparing the future workforce and citizens to most effectively address societal needs. ESIP is a unique organization because it brings together people like me that are more oriented towards applications and users, with data providers, archives, and tool developers. In addition to crossing the data lifecycle, ESIP brings together partners from across sectors including academic, industry, and government. We are grateful that the ESIP community is supported by 3 cooperative agreements from NASA, NOAA, and the USGS. Cross-agency collaboration is another critical component of ESIP's activities and will be present at this meeting. The challenge is that we will discuss over the next 2 weeks and that you brought with you to this meeting are common, and it is likely that someone in this group can help you solve it. I am grateful to serve with a talented board. Over the last 6 months, this group has been highly engaged. They have worked through the search for our next executive director, and with Erin Robinson, ESIP's current executive director, they have provided strategic direction as we move virtual. They are indicated on the Zoom by changing their name to name, ESIP board. Feel free to chat with me or with them with questions, or reach out at any time during the meeting. In addition to the board, ESIP has 4 programmatic committees that can be thought of as the major topics of interest. Data stewardship, that focuses on data management and curation. Education works to help teachers use earth science data in the classroom. Information tech and interoperability focuses on how data systems are linked together, and semantic tech focuses on understanding and describing earth science data. Finally, the bulk of ESIP's work happens in our ESIP clusters. These groups formed at any time by ESIP partners, and you will see the work of these groups throughout the meeting. Megan Carter, ESIP's communication director, shared more about the ESIP collaboration areas during last week's ESIP 101. And there is also the collaboration areas highlights that gives a great summary. I would like to acknowledge the cluster chairs for all of their dedication and energy to this diverse set of topics. In addition to our elected and cluster leaders, ESIP is led by 8 community fellows who are graduate students and postdocs that have research interests aligned with the groups they support. You will meet these community fellows in ESIP meeting sessions over the next 2 weeks. They have contributed significantly to the clusters they support, are presenting posters in this meeting's research showcase, and are the next generation of ESIP leaders. ESIP is a contribution-based community, and these early career professionals are our peers. One particular note is that they will be leading a session next week titled, "What We Wished We Learned in Grad School to Develop Mini Data Management Trainings." I would encourage you to attend. Finally, I would like to introduce the ESIP staff team. The ESIP staff team supports the ESIP community in a way unique to us, and ESIP is flourishing because of their efforts. Notably, the staff has worked tirelessly to reimagine this meeting in the virtual space and make it a reality. On behalf of the ESIP leadership, I want to express my gratitude for all of our 4 staff members. Erin Robinson, Executive Director, Annie Burgess, ESIP Lab Director, Megan Carter, ESIP's Community Director, and Dan Keys, ESIP's Operations Managers. I point you to your reactions on your toolbar if you want to give them a thumbs up or a virtual clap. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, over the past 6 months, we have gone through the search process for our next executive director. I'm excited to welcome Susan Shingeldecker as the incoming ESIP executive director. She started yesterday, half-time, to allow her to participate in this meeting over the next 2 weeks, and will overlap with Erin through the end of Erin's tenure as executive director at the end of September. She will officially take over from Erin on October 1st, the beginning of our fiscal year. Now I'll turn over the introduction and welcome over to Erin.
Thanks so much, Tamara. So it is amazing to me that there are 212 people that are online. So I've been using this jungle gym. Oh, you guys.
Take a deep breath, Erin.
As my last ESIP meeting, I really was hoping that I would make it through my first slide without crying. But I haven't. So here we are, and probably I'll cry a few more times over the next 2 weeks. Just like glitches, it happens. Okay. And my one live meeting attendee here in my office is about to choke, so I think we're okay. So you can think of ESIP as a jungle gym, right? As this, but it's been, and I used to think that this was sort of a weird picture, right? There are people doing all sorts of stuff on this, but you know, what we have been trying to do with that jungle gym is really connect people. And we've done that through virtual collaboration, as Tamara mentioned, with the clusters and the committees. But we've kind of leaned on the fact that we have these 2 in-person meetings a year to bring us together and to build those relationships. And that's over the last 20 years has developed this core values of this community. And so I want you to know that in this virtual space, that we are really this agile, collaborative, community-driven community, and that you are welcome here. And so one of the ways that we've started to refactor ESIP has been in the governance committee and with Megan Carter working on the community participation guidelines or our code of conduct. You will see this everywhere. And in this, there's also a place to report. And so we've moved, since we are in this virtual space, we've moved to reporting through a third-party service. So if at any time in the meeting you feel uncomfortable, something comes up, there's a place to go. And you'll find this link in a lot of places. But really the last 5 months have felt more like this kind of jungle gym. We've been building it as we go. We've been not quite sure what's going on. It really doesn't look like a jungle gym that we necessarily want to play on. But it's led us into this amazing space of thinking about how to refactor ESIP and how to bring ESIP into its 3rd decade in a way that I could not have imagined 6 months ago when we were together in January. And so what you'll see in this meeting and what I'll talk about more over the next couple of weeks is that we've taken money that we originally had planned to dedicate to travel, and we have repurposed it to building capacity in our session leaders. So we have 168 speakers, we have about 80 session leaders, and all of those people have been given this training so that we're not just having a one-way webinar. And even in this session today, we will have a period of time where we are focused on networking and building connections. And so if nothing else happens this week, I really hope that you meet some new people and that you build these connections. And so I think that it's really pushed us out of this in-person, and I don't know why that makes me cry, but out of this in-person space into this adventure. So here's a few meeting by the numbers. It's the largest meeting we've ever had. So there are 512 attendees registered, and more people this morning were emailing, and we have closed registration. This is a first for ESIP. There are at least 20 international attendees. There are 56 teachers. And out of the 512 attendees, there are 196 first-time attendees. So it's an incredible number of both returners. There are people who have been to all 44 ESIP meetings, I have a feeling, and there are people that this is their first experience with ESIP. And so everybody is welcome here, and I think that's such a healthy sign of where we are and where we're going. Just to give you a sense of the kind of the flow of the meeting. So Tuesdays and Thursdays we'll have morning plenaries with a couple of speakers and some networking activity, and then breakout sessions throughout the rest of the day. We opted for a shorter day and for more breaks so that people could continue with their real life. Everything will be recorded and streamed so you can catch things if you miss them. And then what I want to call your attention to especially this week is the First Friday event, which is where we're bringing together our research showcase, which is normally our reception and poster session, and we're combining that with our Funding Friday brainstorming idea. So this should be a really interesting event for you to meet your colleagues and to start to think about a Funding Friday idea. The second week has the same layout. Tuesday, Thursday plenaries. Both Wednesdays are evening plenaries, which give us a chance to connect with our Australian colleagues. And then Friday will conclude with Funding Friday pitches. So we'll talk more about what Funding Friday is, but you can explore that space in Kiko Chat, and Annie Burgess would be happy to answer any specific questions as well. Okay, I'm hitting my groove, you guys. There are a lot of tools, and I have talked about these tools in a lot of different ways, and since I'm running short on time, I'm gonna keep cruising through here, but Sketch is your way to know when anything is happening, and Kiko Chat is where you'll connect with your colleagues and where our sessions will actually be happening. And every day I'll do a quick start at 8 Mountain, 10 Eastern, if you want a quick tour of Kiko Chat. We are tweeting ESIP Fed at ESIP Fed or the hashtag ESIP Fed, or how to get in touch with us. And then the thing that's not on this slide is Slack. And I think many of you have joined our Slack community in the last couple of days. So I think everybody has made it into Zoom. So we will just keep cruising through here. Mute and unmute, you're all muted. You found the chat. You've been able to rename. But there are some Zoom helps if you need it, and each breakout session will also do a quick Zoom primer for anybody who is still new and unfamiliar. But that is Zoom. If you're on the phone, the one thing I want to bring up now is if you're just calling in on the phone, you can *6 on your phone to unmute and mute. So on our side, you'll come in muted, but you can unmute, and you can use *9 to raise your hand if you want to ask a question or you need something from us. So if you're just calling in from the phone, that's how you get in touch with us. *6 and *9.
Hey.
And then lastly, I wanted to highlight, so you can see my Zoom background, you can see Tamara's Zoom background, but normally we have lanyards from Element 84 that are sponsored by Element 84, and instead of lanyards, they have generously given us these cool backgrounds. So these are available, they're in the Kiko Chat announcements for today, but if you want to grab a background, I would love to see these backgrounds around in other people's videos too. And a big thank you to Element 84.
I don't know how to do this. What is this?
And we have hang on. Megan, can you help me with a mute? So Sketch is where you will find both the pre-session activities, so the session recording, the session takeaways, or the abstract and the link to Kiko Chat, and then after the meeting, Sketch is where we archive things. So the takeaways, presentations, etc., all are linked from Sketch. So Sketch is really a key part of your meeting experience. Oops. And lastly, I would like to thank our meeting sponsors. You know, as I said, this has been a completely wild ride for us in the last, since March. And I'm really grateful both to AGU for the Research Showcase sponsorship and to Element 84 for our Zoom background / lanyard sponsorship and for their ongoing support of ESIP, because we weren't sure how they were going to show up in this space or what it was going to look like. And then in addition, I'd like to thank Amazon Web Services for cloud credits and Figshare for supporting our institutional repository with both in-kind donations. So with that leads me to the next part of our plenary, which is the Raskin Scholarship. And the Raskin Scholarship, I will just move to the video to introduce this Raskin Scholarship. Actually, before I do that, so the Raskin Scholarship is part of a bigger effort to notice good work. And this gives you a sense of the awards that ESIP gives. You're probably familiar with the Falkenberg Award and the Martha Maiden Award. Newer awards have been the President's Award and the Catalyst Award. And the Raskin Scholarship was donated by Rob Raskin's family when he passed away. And it's a way for us to recognize and to showcase the work of early career professionals doing things that Rob would have loved. And so this year, Jaclyn Guz is our Raskin nominee. And to do this virtually, I recorded a little introduction video, and then we'll turn it over to Jackie. So thank you for bearing with me with the tears, and thank you all for being here. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And Megan, I think we need to do another mute.
You may need to unmute yourself, Erin, but.
It's my pleasure to introduce and present this year's Robert G. Raskin Award. The Raskin Scholarship is an award made by ESIP to a graduate student or postdoc who works to evolve earth science data systems. The scholarship helps us remember Rob Raskin, earth science informaticist extraordinaire, and was a gift from Rob's family to honor his legacy. The award promotes collaboration, research support, and exposure for talented students in the earth or computer sciences. Each summer, we honor our Raskin Scholarship awardee during the opening plenary and learn a bit more about their work. Jaclyn Guz, a PhD student at Clark University, was chosen as the 2020 Raskin Scholar. Jackie studies the effects of climate change, forest disturbances, and land management in mountain forest ecosystems. She creates predictive models using historical and current data from the Western United States to understand how climate change will impact at-risk communities in the wildland-urban interface. Her research advances ESIP's goal to promote earth science data by utilizing geographic information systems and remote sensing to collaborate with a variety of groups and develop new geospatial methods to analyze earth systems, making data matter. In addition to her research interests, Jackie volunteers with Girls Inc. of Worcester, helping with their Eureka STEM and leadership program. She helped Girls Inc. receive a grant from the National Network of Libraries of Medicine to complete a Healthy Communities mapping project to give Eureka program participants opportunities to learn skills transferable to college and to provide career experiences in geosciences, spatial analysis, and big data analysis. This work helps achieve ESIP's goal to make earth science data more accessible and diversify the geospatial community. Jackie's research interest, her passion for community outreach and volunteerism to show girls that they can be scientists and technologists, impress the Raskin Review Committee, and embodies ESIP's values and those of Rob Raskin. Join me in congratulating Jackie for this award and for welcoming her to the ESIP plenary stage. Congratulations, Jackie.
Yes Globe is a virtual sphere developed at MIT to present and work with globally.
Well, Go back out of
The
this then.
has been
We are
used in our
having
classes and events.
a
We would like to
little
begin developing earth science
that was me. That was the YouTube autoplay right at the end of my video. It's like, where is that coming from? Okay, so Jackie, I think you can share your screen. You may be muted. Okay, Jackie, take it away.
Okay. Hi,
welcome to
my
show
name
your
is
camera.
Jaclyn Guz, and I'm a PhD candidate at Clark University Graduate School of Geography. Before I begin, I would like to
I'm
take the
having trouble
time to
with
thank
this.
Rob Raskin's family and everyone at ESIP for this award. Megan and Erin were kind enough to mail it to me before the presentation, and I'm extremely honored to receiving this, and I know that it'll be extremely useful in helping me complete the last 2 years of my PhD, as well as provide an opportunity to network with other people in the geospatial field. Today, I'm going to be presenting on some of my dissertation data titled Climate Change's Influence on Post-Fire Regeneration Across Spatially Heterogeneous Landscapes. And I want to start by providing some background on how climate change impacts forest ecosystems. Climate change has a direct and indirect impact on forest resilience. The direct impact is change in plant demography, which is large-scale die-off as a result of hotter and drier droughts, as well as an indirect impact on altered disturbance regimes, which means an increase in the frequency, size, and severity of disturbances such as wildfires, insect outbreaks, and windstorms. And together, this impacts ecosystem resilience, which is defined as the ability for an ecosystem to have a disturbance without shifting to a different state controlled by different processes. I'm particularly interested in the fire-climate relationship. And fires are influenced by a combination of vegetation, topography, human activity, and climate variability. And the strengths of these relationships will change depending on the temporal spatial scales considered. My research specifically focuses on topographic variation and climate variability, and that is put in the context of specific vegetation, such as lodgepole pine in the Southern Rocky Mountains and land management in the Western United States. Some background on the Western United States is 2006, Westerling et al. Published a paper in Science on forest fire vulnerability from 1970 to 2003 and found that fire vulnerability is related to warmer summer and spring temperatures, earlier snowmelt, and an overall longer fire season. I'm sure we've all watched the news and have seen the large severe fires in California, Colorado, and more recently in Australia. So my research is focusing on how do these wildfires impact ecosystem resilience, and how can we use the historical range of variability of an ecosystem to improve land management for the future. The concept of resilience is defined as the ability of an ecosystem to tolerate and recover from a perturbation or disturbance without shifting to a different state controlled by different processes. So typically we would have a forest, it would burn, we would expect that it would return to the same state in terms of the species that are growing after the fire, the same function and composition and density. So this has us understand that our term resilience largely depends on our definition of state and understanding how this impacts ecological change. The concern in the most severe cases is when there is a large severe fire, forests can burn to a non-forest state. So that means the ecosystem is unable to regenerate after the forest fire. My research focuses on understanding the broad range of conditions that can be considered normal for an ecosystem, and how a disturbance can also be viewed as altering, damaging, or destroying an ecosystem. So on the right, we have two photos of an ecosystem of forest, And on the top, we have an ecosystem regenerating after the fire. And we would expect it to sometime resemble the forest below when it's done regrowing. And understanding how this ecosystem is regrowing after the fire and if it will resemble what it was before the fire is really where I focus on the majority of my research. I focus on the southern Rocky Mountains, which are characterized by large, infrequent disturbances such as wildfires, insect outbreaks, and windstorms. And my research focuses on stand replacing fires of lodgepole pine. Lodgepole pine are conifer species that are characterized by serotinous cones and prolific regeneration 5 to 10 years after the fire. And this creates homogeneous stands of lodgepole pine that are expected to outcompete other species in the future. And so understanding how this species is going to potentially change with climate is important to creating land management in the wildland-urban interface and Western United States. My research has a combination of field data, climate models, machine learning, and remote sensing data. The field data is core to my research. In 2013, the Forest Ecology Lab at Clark University collected regeneration data on fires from 1939 to 2006. And later this summer, I'm going to be leading a team of undergrads and master's students out into the back wilderness of the Southern Rocky Mountains to collect post-fire regeneration data on more fires that are in red in this map. And I hope to answer questions on how does spatial variability in post-fire climate modulated by topographic variability influence variation in regeneration of lodgepole pine? How does this influence the rate and density of regeneration? And how can we use this information to improve management and adjustment for climate and human behavior? As I said earlier, this summer, I'm going to be leading a team of students into the field to collect field data using a nested plot design on post-fire regeneration. And what's exciting is these students are going to learn a lot about the scientific method, how to collect data, and then correlate the data we collect in the field to their own projects of remote sensing and programming classes they're going to be taking this upcoming academic year. Some of our preliminary analysis has been shown to compare the pre and post-fire densities of regeneration of lodgepole pine, and we are able to then compare the frequency of the distribution of regeneration using the Mann-Whitney U-test. And some of the preliminary results show that there has been a decrease in post-fire regeneration. So for example, if we want to compare the 1939 fire to the 2006 fire, we can see that there is a decrease in post-fire regeneration. And we can visualize this with a box plot, and we can see that on the x-axis, we have the pre-fire density and then the post-fire density 5 years after the fire. And on the y-axis, we have density in stems per hectare. And we can see that the 1939 fire and the 2006 fire had the same pre-fire density, and that's to be expected. However, the 1939 fire had prolific regeneration 5 years after the fire in comparison to the 2006 fire. And so this we can see is a decrease in ecosystem resilience in terms of the ecosystem is not regenerating as much as it used to in prior decades. Additionally, it's concerning that the post-fire density for the 2006 fire is not as dense as the pre-fire density, because as we stated earlier, there would be more regeneration or prolific regeneration density 5 years after the fire before it starts entering the stem exclusion phase where it would start thinning out. So this is even more documentation of concern of the post-fire regeneration of this species. And so once we used our field data to say what are the basic trends in post-fire regeneration data, our next question is to say what influences post-fire regeneration. And we're using a combination of stand scale analysis and landscape scale analysis. And to do this, we're using a combination of climate and topographic variables that we can extract from Google Earth Engine. And then we're using random forest and R to create predictive models to examine the variability of lodgepole pine regeneration. We ended up developing 3 random forest models to examine the variability of lodgepole pine regeneration in relation to topographic and climate factors. And random forest is an extension of the classification and regression trees CART, where decision trees are created by dividing into 2 mutually exclusive groups, and then outputs allow users to identify sub-variables of importance. And our three models focused on the rate of regeneration, so how quickly the ecosystem was able to regenerate after the disturbance, the lag, how quickly the ecosystem is able to grow, so how many centimeters or millimeters per year does the average tree grow, and then what is the initial post-fire density, and we established that as 8 years after the fire. And then from there, we were able to create classification trees using our part from the 3 top variables from the associated random forest models. And some of our preliminary results we can see here. The results of the random forest analysis show that A is lag, so how many years did it take for the ecosystem to start growing. B, the initial post-fire regeneration density measured in stems per hectare. And C, the radial growth, so the average growth rate of trees per year. And variable importance is on the far left of each figure and ranks variable by node purity, which is analog for Gini-based importance and is calculated based on the reduction in sum of squared errors. The higher variables are more important. And on the right, the partial dependence plots show the dependence of the probability of lodgepole pine regeneration for either lag, initial post-fire regeneration density, or radial growth on one predictor variable after the effects of the other predictor variables are averaged out. And what's interesting in these results is we can see that minimum temperature for model A, lag, and for model C, radial growth, actually an increase in the minimum temperature is helping these trees be able to grow faster after the fire occurs, which is counterintuitive to most thoughts on ecosystem management, but other literature reviews show that models on lodgepole pine, that an increase in temperature actually helps them outcompete other tree species. And so understanding how the effects of climate change will either help these trees grow afterwards or change where they're able to grow in terms of a higher elevation is important for wildfire management in the future. And then from there, we're able to create classification trees for lag, initial post-fire density, and radial growth. And these trees were produced using our part with the top 3 predictors from the corresponding random forest analysis. And at each terminal node, information shows the corresponding response variable, its predicted values, and the percent of observations. And from here, we can see that, for instance, again, we can see in A, lag, that minimum temperature, that temperatures greater than or equal to -1.2 degrees Celsius actually increase the ability for an ecosystem to start regenerating less than a year after a fire, which is important for lodgepole pine because they initially release a bunch of seeds after the fire, and quick early successional establishment is key for this tree being able to survive long term. Then our next type of analysis is focusing on a landscape scale. So the previous analysis was on stand scale, and this we're using in Google Earth Engine and Land Trender. And Land Trender is an app in Google Earth Engine, and it's a spectral temporal algorithm that is used for change detection in a time series for moderate resolution, and most specifically, it's mostly used with Landsat data. And it's good because you're able to create yearly composites using the meteoroid approach, in which the value for a given pixel is one that corresponds with the median for all the corresponding pixels. And the result is a time series with a single multi-band image per year. And we're then able to see where does the disturbance occur, how does that influence the rate of regeneration, and how can we analyze that in terms of patch sizes, so fire severity, topographic variability, and climate. In this analysis, we chose to use the NDWI, which we had to manually program into Land Trender. The NDWI, the Normalized Difference Wetness Index, was chosen because it strongly is linked to vegetation structure by incorporating the shortwave infrared. And some of our preliminary analysis is showing the changes in initial post-fire regeneration and just the high severity patches. And we can see on the right an image of one of our high severity patches from the field collection. And we see that on the beginning, we have a lot of regeneration closer up, and then farther back in the image, we see less regeneration. And so future analysis is going to look at why are certain patches with the landscape able to regenerate and others aren't. And so we're going to start seeing what we believe is going to start seeing a coarser landscape in which we'll have areas of high regeneration and areas of very low to no regeneration. And lastly, I want to put this in context of fire management. I've had the privilege and opportunity of working with the Western Fire Chiefs and CAL FIRE, and these people are truly experts in fire management and modeling fire behavior and learning how they use this knowledge from other academic researchers, and they apply this to model the worst case scenario for fire behavior and also the post-fire landscape to prevent a secondary disturbance, such as I'm sure we've all seen on the news, a large fire occurs, there's a rainstorm, and then because of the altered landscape, there's then a large mudslide. And learning how I can use this research to help them and create better fire management has become one of the most interesting parts of my research, and I enjoy collaborating with them. So thank you so much, and I hope y'all all have a great conference.
Thanks, Jackie. I have seen a couple of questions come in from the chat. So the first one that I saw was from Dave Jones, and he asked if you'd be collecting any data on soil conditions in post-fire burn scars.
The reason we didn't do the initial post-fire burn scars is because while that is done in a lot of research and something ideally we would have done, is that the fires we're collecting burned from anywhere from 1939 to 2006, and this summer we're going to be collecting even more data that from fires all the way up to 2015, is that the soil would not be consistent. And so when we collect the data, the original data in 2013, we then had to go back and use understood mortality models to say what was the initial post-fire regeneration. We are trying to use some of the Forest Service's soil plots and geology plots in our later landscape scale analysis with Google Earth Engine. So we're able to actually manually upload those. So if there's not a data set already in Google Earth Engine, you can upload it yourself and then add that to your random forest analysis. So we're not collecting the data, but we're going to use standardized data that is already out there.
Awesome. And one more question from the chat. Tom Paris asked if you considered or compared the performance of NDWI with the tasseled cap transform wetness and greenness feature. I hope you know about it.
Yes, I considered using that in my dissertation proposal, but some of the research going on at Clark University, there are people who are also studying specifically the Southern Rocky Mountains and who have already taken data and correlated it to different indices, and from the results we have had, NDWI seems to be correlating the best. And so eventually within Google Earth Engine, I want to alter the NDWI values to correlate with the STAN scale. And so part of the way we're collecting data this summer is to be able to scale up to a coarser Landsat scale. So being able to pick the correct sample size has been very important in creating this dissertation.
Awesome.
But that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, if we can all use our reaction buttons and we can give Jackie a round of applause. Jackie, I think you're going to be with us a little bit today, and if people want to get in touch with you, will you put your email or contact details in the chat?
Yes, I'll type it in right now.
Great. So our next plenary speaker is Danielle Wood, and I would like to invite Anna Prevette to unmute and to introduce Danielle.
Sure, thank you, Erin. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce Danielle Wood. She's the director of the Space Enabled Research Group at the MIT Media Lab. And her group seeks to advance justice in Earth's complex systems using designs enabled by space. Danielle has quite a history of experience. So she's currently an assistant professor in media arts and sciences, and also holds a joint appointment in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT. And prior to being at MIT, she was a professor. She was also involved and did work at NASA headquarters, the NASA Goddard Aerospace Corporation, Johns Hopkins, and the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. So she's done quite a lot. She's been at MIT and involved with MIT for a while. She did her undergraduate and 2 masters and a PhD at MIT. And I'm particularly excited to introduce her because Danielle and her team are recipients of a cloud grant from the Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative, which is the program that I lead in the sustainability team at Amazon. And they're doing some very interesting work in West Africa, trying to support local communities and groups in their efforts to manage invasive species and use those fibers and those plants to convert it into products that clean oil-based waste. So very impactful and meaningful work. So I look forward to hearing more about what other work a research group is doing. And I'll just welcome Danielle to join us, and thank you for being with us today. Danielle, are you there? You can take over.
Danielle this morning.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be with you all. And it's really a pleasure to see Anna. I'm just double checking that my camera is working, but I'll go ahead and start to share my screen. Welcome, everyone.
And I'm not seeing your video yet.
Got it.
No, your video of your face. We're not seeing your face, Danielle.
Yes, I know I'm getting an error on my video, but I'm going to try to troubleshoot that while I just get started. I think that might get improved.
Okay.
As
We can go out.
It's so wonderful to have Anna, and thank you for being so kind to give the introduction and to spend the time together. I was very happy to make the note that I wanted to celebrate the collaboration I've been doing with your team. So thank you for being here. As Anna shared, I started about 2.5 years ago serving as a researcher and faculty member at MIT, leading the Space-Enabled Research Group. And my work focuses on asking how we can support sustainability on Earth and in space. And we think about that as a form of justice, and space is one of our key tools in that activity. I'll be showing you a few examples of our work across a couple different fields. Our mission statement is that we seek to advance justice in Earth's complex systems using designs enabled by space. And we think about that from the point of view of asking how the world is full of complex systems that combine aspects of the environment, as well as aspects of technology and human systems. And we think about design as a tool coming from engineering and from art and design as well as from even social science. And we ask how we can bring that together. On one hand, we also focus heavily on the point of view of the Sustainable Development Goals and use that as one of our key aspects of driving how do we know if we're contributing to a more just world. I think this is one of the best lists that the global community has brought together to talk about what it looks like when the world becomes more just in the future. Of course, these are key goals between now and 2030. I think for many of them, we'll have to keep working on them even beyond 2030, but they give us a sense of focus, especially at the level of basic human needs, of sort of systemic needs that we see at the level of cities and nations, but also of global needs, especially in areas such as biodiversity on land and in the water. Of course, many of you are very familiar with these kinds of images that help us see how we use data from space to understand the global crisis of sustainability that we're in. Lately, I've been thinking about it as in terms of exploitation and waste, meaning the way that we operate our global economy, both in terms of how we draw from people's labor and from the environment. We tend to put so much waste, both heat and waste gases, into the atmosphere. We also put a lot of waste into the land and the water. And our patterns of waste are really not sustainable, and that's why we see the kinds of human-induced climate change that we're facing. So many people in the community think about it from the point of view of the impacts on the Earth. But we also have, of course, a similar pattern of creating waste in space. My team actually often goes back and forth, and we work both on waste concerns that happen on planet Earth, as well as things that are happening beyond the atmosphere, because it's a similar pattern where we create space debris. And there's so many millions of human objects also orbiting around the Earth that are not sustainable, and creating a risk that in the future we may not be able to continue to operate satellites safely. Now, even beyond that, humans are planning to operate in the future in places like Mars. And of course, that's exciting, and we look forward to having more human activity beyond Earth. But I just want to point out that there's not as much trash right now on Mars from human activity. And I hope we can keep it that way. I hope we can find ways to innovate and go forward in a manner that allows us to be more sustainable and not exploit the environment so much and not create so much waste, but rather be very innovative and create closed loop environments. So that kind of long-term thinking drives my work on a day-to-day basis. So we can think about that back on Earth and say, how can we learn from that kind of goal back on Earth? Our team brings together 6 kinds of space technology. We rely heavily on satellite Earth observation, but we try to think broadly about the portfolio of tools that come from space to ask how can we support sustainable development by collaborating with development leaders around the world through any of these tools, including satellite positioning and navigation, satellite communication, space technology transfer, human spaceflight, microgravity research, and research infrastructure. We also draw from a variety of tools. So my background is heavily in engineering and policy, international development, but I bring together a team of people that come from a variety of skills, including design and art, social science, complex systems, satellite engineering, and data science. You'll see a bit of those examples in our coming discussion. In order to do our work, especially when we work outside our own hometown, so I'm based in Cambridge in Massachusetts, but when I work in broader locations, I try to be under the advice and under the leadership of development leaders that are based in those locations. So we do projects alongside international development organizations, national and local governments, universities and non-government organizations, as well as companies, entrepreneurs, university scholars who invite us to work in their locations. So right now our projects are happening around the world in places like Brazil, Benin, and Ghana, Indonesia. And we have people that have invited us to work in those cities and towns. And a lot of the work really links to questions around coastal resilience, and especially SDG 14 and 15. Overall, if I gave you a portfolio of all of our work, I'd cover 3 different themes. Today we'll focus a lot on theme number 3, designing space technologies to support the sustainable development goals. But I'll just point out that we also work on designing other kinds of space tech that are not just Earth observation. If we have time, we'll give you some examples. As one fun example, we're trying to develop tools to use beeswax as a fuel for satellites on orbit. We're also doing social science research because we want to understand better how scientists and engineers can actually advance justice in a systemic way in our research and our development of new technologies. Today, I'll be focusing on theme number 3, designing systems that harness satellite Earth observation to support sustainable development. I want to give credit and acknowledge my team. These are some of the graduate students and research staff that are making us space enabled. I'm just really proud, and I'll be giving reference to some of their individual work as we go. I'll give you 4 examples from 4 students' work to start, highlighting how we support sustainable development and links between humans and the environment that are sustainable using tools enabled by satellites, especially Earth observation, but also positioning information and sometimes communication connections. So this work highlights work by Neil Gaikwad, Fatima Muniapa, Ufuoma Ovemera, and Jack Reed, all of whom are working at coming into the doctoral level or already been working several years at the doctoral level within Space Enabled at MIT. I'll highlight first this work that includes Ufuoma, as well as a broader team of researchers from NASA Goddard, East Carolina University, and several collaborators in several countries in West Africa, including Benin and Ghana. And I'll highlight the work in Benin, and this is actually the part that I want to say thank you to Anna and the team at Amazon for, as they supported our activities to be able to better use activities based on having more cloud support to enable our work. And we are really excited to just gotten that ramped up. And so thank you, Anna, for the team. We are daily adding more data sets to our storage area and to our calculation area. Thank you very much to your team. I'll highlight why we're doing it, and Anna gave a great summary. We were invited by a team called Greenkeeper Africa, which is a company that brings together several interesting challenges. One is the fact that there's an urban area in the city of Cotonou, which is a major city in southern Benin, right on the Atlantic coast. And it's between the ocean and a major lake called Nokwe. There's an urban area, but also a community that lives in more rural settings. And they are the ones who are focused on a traditional way of life that brings together fishing and major aspects of boat travel. Now, in this area where boat travel is very important, we also see that there's been impacts by a major invasive plant that actually is happening around the world. This is the water hyacinth. And if you travel to many countries near the equator, you'll see it investing. It really should be based particularly in the Americas, but it's been actually spread by humans all over the world and can be a major pest, and actually can be a concern for the health of fish and of course the navigability of small waterways off of this major lake. And for people who depend heavily on the ability to travel with human-powered boats in order to be successful in marketing, it's really cute. They have access to the waterways throughout the year, and there's a seasonal invasion of this water hyacinth. The company called Greenkeeper Africa has been a leader in helping to address the water hyacinth. They actually bring together many of the women and other people that live in the community to harvest it manually, but they convert it into a product that can be sold, thereby creating opportunity for sustainable use of the product. This is an example of the water hyacinth chopped into pieces and they developed several techniques for manufacturing. And this particular version is very effective at absorbing oil-based pollution, which is another regional concern, where companies that operate machinery or vehicles don't always have excellent oil-based pollution management. This is a picture of some of the team members of Greenkeeper Africa. The team has been growing. Dr. Fulla Muftau is on the far right, and he's the one who first invited me to come to this country and to be able to learn about the work that they're doing. And it's been really a privilege to work with them because they've also linked us to local scientists, local university team members, as well as local government teams, such that our work can be more and more relevant over time to different audience members. Our ultimate goal now is to create a 3-part data tool that allows us to combine data from satellites, Earth observation, and water-based measurements. And so actually the local team will eventually be operating all these 3 aspects, and we'll be able to combine data from these 3 data sources, which is a new capability for Greenkeeper Africa. They don't have previous experience of operating this kind of set. So going forward, we're working together to develop this data set, and we want to first demonstrate the science behind each piece in order to have the data to monitor the water hyacinth in particular, but also to understand the human activities. As you saw, humans are living directly over the water and also focused on developing fishing as a major activity. Thanks to the leadership of our colleagues from NASA Goddard and East Carolina University, especially Lola Patiembo, as well as David Lagamasino, we've been looking back at historical data sets, and my student, Ufomo Ovumera, has focused on developing this data analysis, drawing from Google Earth Engine and being able to see how we can look at long-term time series to get historical views, but also present-day views of how the water hyacinth is growing. So here's just one example, a snapshot from November 2018, focusing on the activities of the water hyacinth. We've done some local validation to identify which water plants have certain growth patterns. So we can identify which ones are likely to be the water hyacinth and which ones may be other plants. So we can look at their seasonal behavior and actually select out those that are probably from other sources of plants. So we're comparing data from a variety of satellite tools and able to also look at local patterns on the ground to understand which is which. This allows us to make a long-term summary of the water hyacinth surface extent, and then the local teams are also developing methodologies to, in addition, add to that an estimate of the biomass. And that will give the Greenkeeper Africa team their best analysis compared to past work to understand the impact they've had in terms of gathering this water hyacinth tool as part of their input to their business. Another story we're focusing on is the fact that Greenkeeper Africa is aware of the local activities called akaja. It's an approach to do fishing in which people have developed fishing nurseries that are made from local materials. And they interact with the water hyacinth. Sometimes they actually spur the growth because they create an anchor for the water hyacinth to grow. And some fishers like to use the water hyacinth as an incentive for fish to come and breed. And other times the water hyacinth fills up the old akaja and just creates a nuisance. So we're interested in this interaction between the 2 activities of the water hyacinth growth and the fishing akaja. So we're exploring the use of radar data to understand if we can map the location of the akaja and its change over time. We're running into lots of challenges, and so we're still kind of improving the methodology, but overall, we think it's possible to detect some of the human structures, both from fishing ponds as well as from houses over the lake using this radar data. And we're particularly exploring how to improve the error estimates in that part of the work. In addition to having the data from satellites, both optical and radar, we want to be able to use drones both for validation and for getting better understanding of what's happening locally. So here's an example of Ufoma working to learn how to pilot a drone based on some great mentorship from our colleagues from the University of California, San Diego. And so here you see a drone-based view looking down at one of these fishing ponds created by humans that we call the akaja. Ultimately, this is working toward having a tool set that will be an online platform that will present the data from the satellites and from the drones, as well as from ground-based water sensors operated by the local teams. We want it to become a very fluid data set that people locally can add to, and that will give a publicly available data source that people can understand various aspects that affect the health of the water. On the local side, they're interested in having locally operated data sets around salinity and dissolved oxygen and temperature of the water. And we want to gradually understand better how to relate those to the behavior of the water plant. This is part of a bigger activity because local scientists and the local company are all engaged with a project with the government to explore water resource management. So all of this can feed into that project as well, where there's of course a lot of community dialogue around how can the entire community, both the urban dwellers and the rural dwellers who are also part of the lake community, interact and safely manage the water for everyone's benefit. So that highlights our work in Benin. I'll just give a few examples from other countries as well, highlighting work first by Neil Gaikwad, who has focused his work in India and is combining aspects of design thinking, computational thinking, as well as economic thinking to ask how to better use data from a variety of sources, including satellites, but in a manner that harnesses machine learning and allows farmers and those who are traditionally not involved with this kind of data set to have benefit. So even though this looks like a very high-tech poster, what Neil's actually doing is considering the needs of people from farms in the area where his family has been based, where he grew up in India. And particularly, he spent time sitting with farmers and talking to them about what kind of issues are affecting their fields, whether that ranges from lack of access to water, or sometimes too much water and flooding, or pests. And he wants to make eventually a data set that allows them to take local data through an app and then compare that to data he might have at the regional scale through satellite data and think about how to better understand how they're communicating both to the government and to insurance companies what their needs are and how they've been affected by possible concerns. Another example coming from India is by Prathina Muniappa. She's very concerned with indigenous communities and how they can maintain cultural knowledge. Her goal is to ask, how can we use geospatial services to better maintain this knowledge, especially when there's changes in culture over time. One great example comes from this community that is in the northeastern part of India. This is a community named the Khasi people. They're actually famous around the world because they have a unique skill set. And in particular, they've created this amazing series of architectural features using the living roots of trees. Perhaps you've seen this before. And they are some folks who have a very special heritage of knowledge. And one question will be, will it be passed on from generation to generation for years to come? Of course, there are many forces that affect communities and make it difficult to maintain that kind of knowledge due to people moving to different locations and perhaps government policies of land management changing. So Prathima is very interested in both documenting kind of the current state, but also providing tools that allow communities like the Khasi to create their own documentation. One example is that she's creating this app that can be used on mobile phones or internet devices and focus on collecting satellite-based positioning service information. And it would be something that could allow local teams to document their own videos and pictures and text describing the traditional techniques they've used for living in harmony with the environment. And this kind of picture would also be required to have confirmation from a member of the community locally who makes it possible to publish the information. So our idea is to make it necessary to get permission from local teams before sharing the information more broadly. So this is something that's in the early stages, but Prathima has been developing this long-term relationship with the Khasi community from Meghalaya and India. Another example that highlights how we've actually transformed some of our work on the environment in response to COVID. So I'll highlight work by Jack Reed, Miles Lifson, there's a few other students that have also gotten involved recently. Jack has been working for the last couple of years in Rio de Janeiro, a lovely place to do field work. So he actually has spent time on a couple of occasions interacting with the city government in Rio. And in particular, there's a community in the area called Garatiba that is known for its mangroves and is some of the main urban mangroves left in the region. And here's in a situation that we want to consider the needs of low-income communities that live near the mangroves and also the needs to maintain the mangroves for sort of city-level benefit. Jack has been working alongside researchers from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro who are also doing local field-based research, both to communicate with local communities and to think about using satellite and drone data to map the mangroves. And thanks again to our colleagues from NASA Goddard who advised Jack on how to build tools to estimate the impact of mangroves over time. We bring that all together in this tool we call EVDT. It stands for Environment, Vulnerability, Decision-Making, and Technology. And all the projects I've shown you in a sense have the same format, where we ask how are we combining data from satellites with data about social impacts and understanding what kind of policies either government or community leaders are making, and which technology do they want to invest in the future to improve their knowledge. In the case of the mangrove growth, Jack has worked alongside the local teams, both in the city government and the university, and developed mangrove growth models, in this case using a combination of Google Earth Engine and data from Landsat. And then we were also learning what the local teams would recommend to include in socioeconomic data sets. And ultimately we want to ask how different historical policies around the way that satellite data has been used has influenced the management of the mangrove trees themselves, which leads to an influence on the growth of fish and the benefits for local communities. Now, this inspired us, and Jack's been developing in Portuguese, a locally available tool that he's sort of co-developing with input from both the scientists and the policymakers, but also from community members that he's met in Brazil. But in addition, we noticed the same way of thinking is highly relevant to COVID actually, and has led to an activity that we're calling VITA. So VITA is a decision support system, and it builds directly on the same model I showed earlier. We want to combine data from a variety of data sources, including from the environment, socioeconomic aspects, public sector aspects, and technology aspects. Now, I'm not a public health expert, so I wanted to make a contribution to COVID. I called upon colleagues and was fortunate to connect with colleagues at Harvard Public Health who also have engineering experience, in particular Professor Mohammed Jalali. And thanks to that connection, we were able to combine our work focused on Earth observation with their work focused on public health. So we've now brought together this framework called VITA and shared it with teams in Brazil, in Chile, in Mexico, Indonesia, Angola, and many people in their local environment are interested in drawing from this model because they are also trying to combine this information. One of the challenges of COVID is that we're very concerned, of course, with how to make the public sector decision-making around investing in public health, while also concerned with social distancing, but also not having such major harms economically. And so, of course, that requires this kind of view. And I'll just highlight that I'll share in the chat a link where you can see a video with more information demonstrating how the VITA tool is working right now and how we're working with local teams who will make customized versions in each country that highlight how they can use it with their own data sets. I'll pause here and just thank you so much. I apologize, we've still not gotten the video working, even though it definitely worked when we first set up for practice about an hour ago. But I'll certainly be happy to continue to share via audio and look forward to your questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. So Nadine Alame from OGC just asked a question in the chat about, do you have a link to the VITA decision support system for more info?
Thank you so much for asking about VITA. And I can highlight that VITA is a work in progress. Of course, it's something that we've definitely developed the framework for. What we've also been working on is asking each team that we're collaborating with how they want to use it. So what I'm going to share now is an example of a prototype that would show how it could be used kind of in a storyboard form for Brazil. And I'll also show a link with a video that gives it the latest status. So here is a prototype for Brazil. And I'll also share a link with a video with more details about how VITA is working so far. Thanks for the question.
So a couple of they're starting to come in fast. Eileen Shea has asked one, she said, thank you for this really interesting presentation and exciting work. And she said she'd love to know how Space Enabled reaches out to and/or engages other potential partners.
Thank you so much. I'll just follow up to say I've dropped 2 links into the chat regarding VITA. One gives a video that gives the latest status and talks about the partners we're working with around the world. And the other is a link to an example of a storyboard showing how it can work. So thank you. I love getting asked this question about what it looks like for us to interact with partners. And there's 2 stories to tell. One is that when I did my PhD work at MIT between 2008 and 2012, that was an era where as a student, I asked a research question, which was, how are countries, especially in Africa, but also in Latin America and Southeast Asia, how are they adopting space technology, especially Earth observation satellites, as part of their national development priorities and plans? So during that period, I was fortunate, first through internet research and through conferences, but eventually through field research, to visit many countries around the world and meet their space leaders. So I spent a couple of years actually traveling wherever I could, especially to Nigeria, South Africa, to Kenya, to the UAE, Turkey, Malaysia, Singapore, Korea. Many people hosted our work, and I was able to do interviews about how space technology was part of their national work. And of course, several key meetings, such as the International Astronautical Congress and a few others that kind of gathered people. So you could say I've spent the last 10 years or so trying to meet everybody who does space, especially near the equator, meaning countries that are Southern Hemisphere countries. So that's one of the reasons that now as a professor, I have these connections and I'm able to come back and work with people.
Yeah, there are a few more, I don't know, Danielle, if you see these in the chat, if there's anything that looks particularly interesting to you that you want to cover. One from Rob Casey at IRIS: what challenges does SE face when trying to find relevant data from a myriad of sources and incorporate it into studies? That's a nice one for ESIP to hear about.
Thank you so much. Do you mind repeating the last section of that question again?
Yep. So what challenges does ESI face when trying to find relevant data from a myriad of sources and incorporate that data into studies?
That's a wonderful question about how we identify data sources. And I can say that's something that I'm still learning, meaning there's two sides. One is that I do feel privileged in terms of being aware of the companies that are active. So there's part of the new commercial companies. And I'm so thankful I can highlight that NASA is funding the work we're doing in Benin and Ghana, and that they make available to their current investigators access to commercially available data that NASA's been investing in. So I appreciate NASA and other government agencies experimenting with commercial data buys. And so that's a big experiment for all of us, meaning we are thankful that they're trying out the business model, and we're thankful that we can try out the data itself and see what happens. And so we're playing with it all the time and trying to see what we can learn and learning from other people's publications. So that's an ongoing exploration. The other side is that I feel very fortunate to have links to different NASA experts. Basically, I call upon if I need help understanding their particular data sources. I know people sometimes spend their careers really emphasizing a particular instrument, and they really are the experts in that instrument. And I am not the expert on a particular instrument, for example. So I often need to call upon experts who can help me understand the appropriate way to either use a modeling output or a certain data source. The other side is then there's the international colleagues, right? I think I haven't yet fully explored the best ways to use data sources from European colleagues and those from Argentina and Brazil and India and Korea. I know some of what the data sets are, but I'm not always taking the best advantage of those. So I hope to learn more about that in the future.
Nice. I think we have time for one more question. So Pierre asks, are you linked to UN data flows? We have a team in UN Oceans working on data and information systems, which could be cool to interoperate with.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for the question. I would love to get more information. I will say I'm thankful that our team has recently joined GEO, the Group on Earth Observation, as well as ESIP. And I am a first-time ESIP member today. I'm so glad to be here with you all. But I'll just highlight that I'd love to hear from Pierre, and I'll happy to have follow-up information. I don't know the details of that project.
Awesome, cool. So one of the things I was thinking about, and one of the things that we've been, how do we simulate how people would normally walk up to the stage to you, Danielle, after the session is over? And I wonder if you and if Jackie, if she's willing, would head to a breakout at the end of this, and people could follow up, could have additional short conversations with you. But that's one idea I'd be interested in experimenting with at the end of this session. Thoughts? Would you be willing to try that with me, Danielle?
Thanks so much. I'm happy to try, and I can stay for about 15 minutes afterward.
Cool. That would be awesome.
Thank you.
So if we could thank Danielle, everybody can use your reaction button and give her the clap or the thumbs up, lots of claps. Awesome. So the next part of our plenary session, for the last 20 minutes of this session, we are going to work with our facilitator, Charlie Haley. And so Charlie, if you would unmute and join me. So as I mentioned at the beginning, making connections in this virtual space is really one of the things that has been on the forefront of my mind and how we interact with each other in this space. And one of the ways that I came across as I was doing a lot of research about how to do this is through an approach called liberating structures. And so you'll see that woven throughout the next 2 weeks. But I'd like to invite Charlie, our facilitator, to join me and to explain our next activity. And I would also, just one other quick thing, Charlie, I would ask you all to be brave at this point. This is the point in most virtual meetings where I am ready to leave. So please don't drop off the call and just try with us in this experiment. Okay, Charlie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Haley, and you'll probably bump into me if you attend other plenary sessions. I'm here to help you. I'm actually here to help you bump into each other and discover each other. I'm here to help you make attending some of these meetings a lot more interactive, a lot more enjoyable and fun. Let's see. I'd like to kind of slow down just a little bit and take in that there are actually 512 other people that you could potentially bump into during this meeting. Right now, there are 243 of you in this virtual room together. And that is a mind-boggling array of intelligence, experience, skills, and know-how across so many disciplines. Imagine a challenge that you might have that you could actually tap into this intelligence and get some help on. Like what? I'd like you to take about like a few seconds, 30 seconds, and just think about what's a challenge that you would like to attract some advice on or collaboration on to help you move that challenge forward. What challenge or roadblock are you facing that somebody here probably knows something about? And let's see, let me, okay. So what I'm asking you to do, I just typed into the chat. What's a challenge that you'd like to attract advice or collaboration on? And just think of something. Okay, so for the next little bit, I'm going to invite you, and it is an invitation. So I'm inviting you to stay here in this virtual room with us. And you're going to have a chance to meet. I think we're going to modify this a little bit. You're going to have a chance to meet somewhere around 6 to 8 other people in 2 different rounds. And what's going to, and before we go do that, so it'll be like in breakout sessions. So what I'd like you to do is imagine if we were face to face, that I would, we'd be all in the room and I would give you the invitation to go find a little pod of people, go find a group of people that walk around the room and stop when you find someone intriguing. And I want you to introduce yourself, maybe your affiliation, and then in just 1 minute, share what is the challenge. What challenge do you bring to this meeting with you that you would like to attract advice or collaboration on? And so that's what I'm going to be asking you to do here shortly. But in order to do that, I think I'm going to invite you, anyone that feels comfortable, please turn your videos on. Turn your videos on. I would like you to just take a few minutes and use the little arrows to the right of your Zoom window and kind of scroll through. Look at all of the people from all over the world here with you right now and think about how intriguing they are, how about their intelligences, their disciplines, their areas. You have such a deep and broad level of know-how in this room with you that I am sure there is someone here that can help you with your challenge to help move it forward. So just take in all of the people you're going to be bumping into. And they're just like you. They came here to learn and contribute to making this a great meeting. So I think with that, thank you all for all of you that turned your video on, because it really makes it a lot easier to meet other people when you can look each other in the eye. And so with that, I think Erin, I think we're ready to put people in breakouts. And so as Erin gets ready to do that, so what's going to happen, we're going to put you in a breakout room for about 8 minutes with 4 or 5 other people. And introduce yourself, your affiliation, and what's your challenge that you want to attract some help. You'd love to attract some help on. And at the 7-minute mark, you'll get like, oh, in 1 minute, your breakout room is going to complete. So kind of wrap it up then, and you'll come back here, and then we'll do one more round of the same thing.
My team and I are doing, because we basically, again, we were talking about this question, right? We were trying to make both the Earth more sustainable, but also space. And one of the big questions is how to reduce space debris. one of our projects focuses on making policies that would encourage voluntary incentives to ask satellite operators to deorbit their satellites. So you could say, well, a lot of small satellites, they don't have any fuel, so they basically just get deorbited whenever the gravitational forces bring them down. But we're interested in making it easier and cheap, but also making it sort of global. So I want to highlight Dr. Javier Stober. He's a researcher he got his PhD at Stanford and now works on my team. That a whole bunch of folks are working together, and they're testing the idea that wax, basic candle wax, but also beeswax, can be used for fuel. We didn't make this part up. This is something that was discovered by the team at Stanford about 20 years ago. This is just your everyday wax you can find in the grocery store, but it can be used, and it's been shown to be used as a rocket fuel. So this is a video highlighting how it can be burned in a lab as a rocket fuel, which is very cool. So I wanted to ask the question, what can be done in microgravity? So instead of being in a lab, you'd be in microgravity, but also in a vacuum. I wanted to find out how the burning behavior would be different and also how the manufacturing would be different. So we're gonna do a bunch of tests in our lab and in thermal vacuum chambers and in the space station eventually. And when we get all that done, we'll also try to get a satellite in orbit to demonstrate this. We think that the way that we behave with the wax will be different. This is actually a video of melted wax, and the wax is spinning because we're trying to convert it from just a lump of wax with no shape into the ideal shape for burning, which is a cylinder with the hole in the middle. And so we're preparing that, and it can be done pretty affordably, and it can be done with a relatively medium cost and kind of low-tech system, but it does take experience about how to do it. So we think this can be done actually all over the world. And what you saw just now is that perfect formation where it was spinning at just the right rate, that the liquid melted wax made a beautiful empty hole in the middle, which is just what you want for burning for wax. So we try to do this in our lab, and we try to really measure every single detail about how long it takes and the temperatures and what's happening. We should do it again in a thermal vacuum chamber. We also want to do it in microgravity. So in this case, we can take it on planes or rockets, which we're trying to do both. And I'll just say that COVID is throwing us off on our schedule. We had really great plans this year for doing more of these flights, and some of them are on hold. But Dr. Stober has been developing this system, which is a plane research project that we'll take onto this plane. And our first colleague that did it was Christine. She went a couple of years ago. And we have another colleague who went recently. Her name is Juliet. And they've both flown on these zero-G flights that allow you to float a bit for like 20 seconds at a time. And we're spinning this wax to see if we can make the cool shape we just showed you. And this is helping us prove that we could actually have a robot basically spin wax inside a satellite and get the results that we'd want, and then be able to use that as fuel. It would be just the right geometry for burning. So this is another piece of Space Enabled work, and we see it all as linked, because what if people around the world were taking care of their bees and having healthy bees, and they could also harvest the wax without harming the bees and make local fuel for satellites for their burgeoning space programs, which I think is part of a sustainable community.
Absolutely. What a cool thing. Bees powering satellites. So we have maybe time for anybody have one comment, question?
I have a question.
Go.
Go ahead. You. Oh, is it possible to?
I lost Ted's sound. Please go ahead.
Okay, I think Ted is in my office, so let's try my sound. Ted.
Is it possible to use that beeswax for local heating in houses or other places on Earth?
Cool, I heard that sound. That was great. But thanks so much for asking about that beeswax. It's a great comment, because actually wax, whether it's from bees or from the candle wax comes from basically oil refining, but no matter where you get the wax, it is a phase change material, and it has this nice property. I mean, you can burn it, that's one option, but it also works as a thermal insulator. So not myself, but I've read some papers about other projects where people say, oh, can you use it in situations where you're energy constrained? Like, let's say you need to keep some medicine or food cool or chilled, and you can sort of get it cool, and then you can actually have materials that have insulation made from wax as a way to maintain the temperature for a short time. That's an idea that I've seen people consider, like for thermal sensitive situations, such as incubators or food storage. And then of course, yeah, it's also, yeah, you can burn it too, but the question would be like, what are the uses you need for it? Whether it'd be better to use it up or to use it as a longer term thermal insulator, like in a building.
I have a question. Can I go?
Sure. Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right. So I really like both the plenary sessions, and for Danielle Wood, I wanted to, and maybe for both of you, ask you about I hope I'm saying it right, transdisciplinary techniques that you apply in your work. So that, and Danielle, you already mentioned that you haven't prescribed to a particular method, but have you, especially with your reference to justice, looked at incorporating maybe from the humanities or from other scientific disciplines like social sciences into your work to more rigorously address the resilience challenges that you are interested in?
And this is from Jonathan, right?
Yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the question because I definitely should clarify. I wouldn't want to leave the wrong impression. So I don't mean to say that I don't draw from traditional methodologies. I just mean I don't pick one to be my only one. Meaning both myself and my team members use a variety of them. But definitely what you say is important. Meaning if I'd like to do work, for example, in this case, some of our work also addresses studying issues of justice and racial equity in technology development and innovation. So when I do that work, I very much draw from existing social science research methods as well as scholarship. And so in that part of the work, myself and my team members, we are, you could say, submitting to the tools of that discipline. So we're reading and referencing from scholars in innovation studies and science, technology, and society. We're publishing in the same place they would publish. We're presenting the information in that style. When I work with earth scientists, again, I'm sort of submitting to that community's norms and ways of working. So I definitely, I'm not trying to buck the approaches used by these different tools. I try to really learn from them and learn how to collaborate with them. Either I learn it myself enough to do it correctly, or I work with colleagues who know how to do it correctly.
Jackie?
Thank you for asking.
And Ted, did you have one more question for Jackie? No? Jackie?
I thought Jackie might answer that question.
Jackie, any thoughts on
cool.
I'm part of a SYSTINC group with the National Environmental Justice Lab near Annapolis, and my research team there it's working on something very different for my dissertation on environmental justice in terms of water inequality in Appalachia. And so we're doing census analysis on the hotspot of water inequality justice recorded by the federal and state governments, and then working with more social scientists on the dominant and non-dominant discourse about this. And so how does policy and conversations surround this relate to what's actually happening in the science? So that's kind of where a lot of my more social justice interdisciplinary work is focused on, and we're planning on submitting 2 papers to a journal, a special issue journal in December on this.
Yeah, of course, that's the great research center in Annapolis.
Yeah, they've been wonderful. It's part of a graduate pursuit fellow, and I've really enjoyed working with the SYSTINC organization.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, guys, I think we need to wrap this one up, but thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Danielle and Jackie, for great talks. I think this just kicked our meeting off on exactly the right note, and I'm so grateful to both of you.